I'm very pleased to be rounding out the end of day one of the Global Roundtable to come back to basics almost a little bit, to talk about impact, impact management, and the governance of impact. This is obviously what brings us together as a community. That's what we've been talking about over the last day, also yesterday. We will be for a few more days, but that doesn't stop the fact that there's still a lot of fragmentation, debate over things like impact and impact management. Should we be looking at single, double materiality? Is it risk? Is it impact? Are they linked? We also have a multitude of approaches to sustainability, impact management. There's a multitude of things that you're engaged on, whether it's human rights due diligence, whether it's risk management, impact management, valuation, impact investing. And we've heard many times, I think, as UNEP FI and other organizations, that can be a little bit overwhelming. It's great because it's an increasingly well-equipped toolbox, but it's also still a little bit messy. So this session is very special, actually, for UNEP FI, because for the last 3 years, we have been working together with our peers, basically with other leading sustainability initiatives and stand-setters in the area of private sector and sustainability, to try and collaborate and work together and make what is effectively a landscape of frameworks and resources for sustainability by default into something more of an ecosystem by design that can equip practitioners and market players with what they need to deal with sustainability. And so it's my great pleasure today to have a session in which UNEP FI and our colleagues in this initiative called the Impact Management Platform give you a little bit of an update of what we've been up to and some of the newest releases and latest things that we've been doing today. So, my pleasure to be calling our dear partners to the stage. So allow me to start with Vincent Siegerink. Vincent is with the OECD WISE Center. WISE, as wisely suggested, stands for well-being, inclusion, sustainability, and equal opportunity. Who OECD is currently co-chairing with UNEP FI, the Impact Management Platform. Next, I'm very pleased to be welcoming also Mark Gough, who is CEO to the Capitals Coalition, and who will be co-chairing with us in the next period of the platform's activities. I'm also very pleased to be calling up Noelia Garcia, who is Head of Sustainability at ISO, the International Standards Organization. Joining us next on the stage is also Susan Stawicki, who is Head of Reporting at the UN Global Compact. As you know, gathering many hundreds of corporations around the world. Last but not least, not a direct member of the platform, not a standard setter per se, but a very importantly involved also market player in our activities is Olivier Wibo from Bloomberg, who is product manager for Sustainable Finance Solutions. And I will be moderating the session. My name is Careen, and I head up our Impact and SDG team at UNEP FI. Thank you for all being here today, for being a team. And I think it's fair to say that not necessarily everybody knows about the platform and how we work together as a group, and also, a little bit how we're thinking about impact and impact management. So I'd like to turn it over to Vincent and to Mark first to just give a little bit of background perhaps on the platform and what we're thinking of when we talk about working together on impact and impact management. So maybe over to you first, Vincent.
Thanks so much, Careen. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. So yeah, maybe level setting a little bit first here. So by impact management, we really mean that entire process by which companies, investors, and financial institutions really understand all of their positive and negative impacts on people and the natural environment, by which they respond to these impacts, and also through which on which they communicate their impacts through, for example, corporate reporting. And many of you, in response to regulatory developments, are of course involved in particular these days in that last piece, But of course, impact management is really that entire process of understanding, but also really practicing and responding to these impacts. And so the impact management platform is a collaboration of international organizations and leading standard setters that each sort of contribute little pieces to that puzzle of guiding organizations, guiding financial institutions and companies on that journey. Now, why do we think that is important? Why do we believe in mainstreaming impact management? And that is really the mission of the impact management platform. First of all, of course, because managing impacts is a necessary process to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to contribute towards greater human well-being. But we also believe that impacts are often at the root of your regulatory, your legal, your reputational risks, and so managing impacts is sort of an imperative from the perspective of those risk management processes. And finally, thirdly, impacts really constitute sort of contributions to our system level risks. So climate change, ecosystem loss, nature loss, and increasingly also inequality really are these system level risks that especially portfolio investors, financial institutions that have large portfolio exposures are exposed to. And so by mainstreaming impact management, we can really make sure that collectively we are tackling these system level risks. Now, as a platform, as a group of organizations, we are 18 around the room. We have organizations that are providing resources, standards, and frameworks to businesses and finance, your mainstream corporates and mainstream financial institutions, but also those looking at impact investing, social entrepreneurship, and really looking at the sort of entire span of that process, from management to reporting to benchmarking. And we think it's really important to have that big umbrella of organizations around the room in order to step by step collaborate with one another and make sure that these resources increasingly speak to each other in a coherent way. And I think especially in a moment where we also see these audiences blurring, right? Like you have more mainstream financial institutions looking at making a positive impact. You have impact investors realizing that they also have to manage their negative impacts on people and the natural environment. And so as those lines start to blur, it becomes increasingly important for us as international organizations and standard setters to come around the room and to work together to make these standards speak to each other in a more coherent way.
Mark.
You just said there that they're doing little things, didn't you, these companies? I'll probably push back on that. Some of the organizations, 18 involved, I think some of them think they're doing big things, maybe. Sorry, taking a bit of a time there. The different words that people use for impact in the community, so well-being is one, true cost, capitals is one that we've been using. But all of these need to come together, and we can't actually make informed decisions unless we've understood the impact and the dependencies of what we do. So all of these organizations are actually activating different parts of the system in different ways. But we have to, if we're going to get any of them to succeed, they have to be working together. So we have to be able to see a continuity between what we're doing within business management accounting, through the financial activities that are going on, through investment, asset management, all the way through to policy drivers as well. We've seen massive growth over the last 5 years particularly around this topic of impact management. And for those of you that were in the hall yesterday, you will have seen some of the figures there. I know the OECD, 70% of the countries that are part of the OECD have well-being plans now. 98 countries actually have been using the system of environmental economic accounts. We think we're at about 25% of the S&P 500 have done some work on the activities around valuation. So all of those different activities, we're now getting to the point where we need to make all of those parts of the system connect up. And the impact management platform is the vehicle where we're going to be able to do that, that connects all of these pieces together. So you may not have heard of what we've been doing up until now, as we've been trying to connect the pieces, but you will hear about us in the future about how we're connecting these pieces of the puzzle together.
Thanks. And I think to make this, get it a bit concrete for everyone, I'd like to move on to Noelia and to Susan, also, partners of the platform. We've been, Mark's saying, you might not have heard much of what we've done. We've basically been spending a lot of time clarifying and, sort of understanding amongst ourselves key terms, concepts of impact and impact management, going really into the foundations a little bit and getting a common understanding. And maybe it would help the audience, Noelia, Susan, to hear from you, from your perspectives, very different organizations. Noelia, international standards organizations with standards for all sorts of players on all sorts of topics, including many sustainability topics, and Global Compact, focused on the private sector, very large network there of practitioners, how that work, has been relevant to you so far.
Thank you so much, Careen. It's really a pleasure being with the colleagues of the Impact Management Platform here, with all of you. Organizations are key actors in the communities they operate, and as such, they play a very important role in shaping the social, the economic, and environmental landscapes in which they operate. That's why understanding and having a clearer definition and a common definition of impact management is so important, because that will be the only way for supporting these organizations in ensuring that their projects, their initiatives assess, understand, and address those impacts. And it's important to understand also, I think, that talking about impact management is not only about doing good, which it is, but it also makes business sense to consider the impact management. An organization, by considering impact management, will fulfill its corporate responsibilities, but also making sure that they contribute to a more equitable, sustainable, and prosperous society. ISO has been active in that space for many years, has a long-lasting history supporting organizations in managing their impacts by providing frameworks, providing guidelines, and providing best practices on how to consider and align their organization's operations with sustainable or sustainability goals. Example, ISO environmental management systems or many other management systems, the work we are doing today with UNDP to help organizations align their operations with the Sustainable Development Goals. How can they impact operationally? So for us, it has been very important to join the platform and to be part of this community, because we fully align with its objectives. The first one is we need to provide tools for organizations to be able to put sustainability at the core of their operations, and to align that with the disclosures frameworks and efforts that are happening today. Those disclosure efforts will be an empty shell if they are not linked with robust internal operations that put sustainability at the heart. That's the first thing. The second thing why this has been very important, the work of the platform for us, is to bring coherence in that space. We all agree that this is the alphabet soup, no one understands, a lot is going on, a lot of options are putting, a lot of standards are being put in the market, but for me, that's a signal that actually standards are helpful. Now, it's true that we need to make an effort to create clarity. That's why we are coming all together to do that, to support the market, to support the financial sector, to support regulatory harmonization, so that we all speak the same language, and then we can compare activities, we can measure actually progress. And then The last objective of the platform that really speaks with us is identifying gaps, because there are still tools that are needed, and we believe we can contribute to that.
Thank you. Susan.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with the UN Global Compact, we're the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, and we have the mandate to inform private sector's contributions on the SDGs. When companies join the Global Compact, they're basically committing to 10 UN principles around labor rights, human rights, the environment, and anti-corruption. And we have capacity building in that we have over 60 country networks or country offices worldwide that support companies wherever they are in their sustainability journey. So if they're just getting started or if they're sophisticated multinationals, we're there to make sure we meet their needs as they move along their journey. We're trying to drive transparency and innovation, and for this reason we have a reporting mechanism that is required of all Compact participants called the Communication on Progress. Every year, companies are asked to report on their progress against the 10 UN principles, and we seek transparency and accountability, and really are happy to participate in the work that the partners are doing here to support interoperability, coherency, standardization. Our particular reporting requirement helps inform the UN and governments around the private sector's contribution to sustainability. We also use the data that we collect to inform our programmatic development. And we're also just trying to galvanize the private sector globally to move forward towards a more sustainable future. So we supply data back to our companies through a data visualization tool. Our participants they have the ability to benchmark themselves against aggregate cohorts by country, by region, by sector, so that they understand where they are and where they need to get to. But that's not enough. That's kind of the floor for us. We really rely on the impact management platform to help further supplement our participants' journey. So we leverage the resources that the IMP provides in helping companies go beyond the 10 principles. So we really appreciate the diverse group of partners and the various audience these partners serve, because we're covering all industries and regions globally. And it's great to be able to leverage our partners' various areas of expertise, as we're not fully equipped to answer every question and meet every need. So what we do is we try to serve as a distribution channel for the platform and provide information. The two latest publications from the IMP will be promoting through our various platforms and materials, and also through our UNGC Academy, which is our e-learning platform that a lot of our participants leverage to further their sustainability efforts.
Thanks, Susan. I'd like to round off this maybe first introductory part of the session tonight by turning to you, Olivier. You're kind of coming into the discussion here from a slightly more external perspective, from Bloomberg as a product manager, and it'd be great to hear from you. You hear what we're trying to do as a series of initiatives, standard setters. How does that resonate for a market player like Bloomberg? The fact that we're focusing on impact, that we're trying to work together, how's that going to be relevant to your work?
So yes, all that was very interesting, but I'm coming from a different angle. So for people who don't know what Bloomberg does, we are an information provider for mainly what we call the buy side, the investors. I think we've got 1/3 of our clients, which is the banks, and then a very small portion which are corporates. So really, we are trying to serve our clients. So what I'm going to share with you is what we see speaking with our own clients. So first of all, the good news for impact is that it is part of all our ESG conversation. It is the more vibrant, important topics, and it's growing. So this is good news. Now let me turn to the bad news. Even if 95% of the conversations are about impact, the reality is that it's not adopted as much as the beautiful 95% in the investment process. And the simple reason is very simple. If you are an investor, an asset manager, you are basically supposed to follow the fiduciary duty that you investors, the owner of that data, of that money is putting on you. Being retail to some extent, being a pension funds, being institutions. And most of our asset managers are really making business out of institutions. So until we've got something different than just the traditional fiduciary duty, it will be difficult to get there. So you've got the believers, that's the first category, the non-believers. And amongst those non-believers, there are some people who want to be convinced, by the way. And I'm going to come to that, but the non-believers, to some extent, consider impact as being potentially a concession to the return. So that concessionary aspect is very important. I think that can be clarified with a time horizon investment. Now, for Bloomberg, because we are supposed to serve all our clients, we try to stay neutral. We may have our own beliefs, but basically we are providing data set and tools which help any of our clients to take their own decisions, being full fiduciary duty or believers who think that they can do both. They can do impact and fiduciary duty at the same time. So where do we see IMP being important? I think for me, it is to move from the echo, if I may say that, echo chamber from the impact, pure impact, to democratizing impact to the non-believers. That's the job I feel that you should work in that direction. So how can we do that? How can you do that? First thing is, even for the believers, it will help them to have standardization. You mentioned speaking common language. That's superbly important. Obviously, there is a soup of acronym. It was awful in ESG integration. It's no better in impact. I would just say that to some extent, you saw the problem before maybe ESG integration, because 3 years ago you started to put yourself together. So if anything, you've got a head start in that regard. So that's super exciting. So it's important, clarity, transparency, matrix, reporting, all that is very important, and the two papers being about classification or selection of topics are very important. Now, the second thing which is very important and which is going to be superbly difficult is that if you want to convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced, is basically to create that link being SDGs and financial return. I think it's a little bit unfair because nobody asked that for traditional finance to prove those kind of things, but because you are the newcomer, that's on you to prove it. It's going to be difficult. I will suggest to try to look at your topics, and slice that between short-term, long-term, and mid-term, because all you investors have got different type of profiles. So I think that's very important, and to make sure that you, apologies again for this, to lower yourself to speak their own language. And for me, their own language is simple, it's US dollar. If you can monetize something, I'm going to listen to you.
Thank you, Olivier. So hopefully gives you a first flavor of what we're doing and what we're trying to respond to. But as said at the beginning, it's been, a bit of an experiment. We've decided to come together as this group just 3 years ago. So it's been 3 years, and we said we would give ourselves that time to experiment. And so today we're actually very, very pleased because two things are happening. On the one hand, we've kind of come to the end of that phase, which we saw as a foundational phase, and we're doing that with the release of two final pieces of reflection, of analysis, after having done a lot of work on terminology, key concepts, on defining impact management and what the different steps of impact management are. And you can find all of that on our website. We've done two additional, let's say, pieces of work, R&D on basically topic nomenclature, so different sustainability topics and how we name those, and one on sector classification. So we're very pleased, in this next round to say a few words about that. And the second is to say we've decided that we're going to continue on this journey. But we'll say a bit more about that in a moment. For now, I'd like to turn back to Vincent to maybe introduce some of the R&D work that we have just released to the public.
Sure, thanks, Careen. So I'll speak to this topic nomenclature bit. So for those of you that are familiar with sort of navigating all these different standards and frameworks, you will know that for as many sort of standards and frameworks there are on sustainability related issues, there are as many ways as sort of classifying and organizing these issues into different topics, right? And this is something that we recognized as a group, and so what we have completed now, and which has just been launched on our website, is really a thorough review of 33 of these standards and frameworks and resources, and the way that they both name and categorize these topics. And so this review really looks at sort of that sort of necessary structure that is helping practitioners guide their way around sustainability issues. Now, a few things we found. First of all, that there is a lot of variation in the way that these topics are organized. Second of all, that within these resources, there's sometimes a little piece of sort of conceptual coherence missing that we think collectively we can improve. And this matters, first of all, really because having a thorough understanding of the way that you, as an organization, as a business or a financial institution, might impact people or the natural environment is really a first necessary step in managing these impacts. And we call this sort of the need for impact management to be holistic. And so having a good common understanding of what these impacts are and what these topics are is really critical for us as a group. And these variations, these differences in the way that we classify topics also impede the connectivity between our different resources. They are an impediment to that interoperability that we want to achieve. And so this review is really a first step for us as a group of organizations towards kind of making steps towards that greater coherence. We are really the primary audience for this work. It's really part of our theory of change that these types of resources are really useful for us and our organizations to improve and again achieve that coherence over time. But we also think that you as practitioners, as financial institutions, can benefit from these resources in sort of understanding how we as a group think about the way that our resources relate to each other. And so we encourage you to take a look at it as well.
Thanks, Vincent. And I'll say a word about the other paper that we've released as part of our initial research and development. This other review has to do with industry or sector classifications. That might sound like a slightly dry topic, although we were talking taxonomies in the previous panel, and though that's just one example of different sustainability resources, norms that are built basically on sector classifications, industry classifications, of which, again, there are many. There's an international standard for such classifications, but each jurisdiction has its own. There are also market, driven classifications, and as with topic nomenclature, that derives certain barriers to interoperability. What this particular review has done is to, first of all, explain a little bit the role of such classifications in sustainability and in impact management. Taxonomies is one example, but there's also a lot of other resources that derive from such industry classifications. Materiality maps would be one example of that. Building up, data sets, rankings, benchmarkings, those are also based on sector classifications. There are a lot of methodologies that increasingly get very specific to different topics. Reporting is done on sectoral lines. Indicators, target setting is done in a sector-specific way. And so making sure that we have interoperable but also fit-for-purpose industry classifications is actually really important. So this is one of the things that's explored in this paper. And then the other thing that you'll find there is also a reflection of some of the things we've found in terms of some of the gaps and some of the things that could be done maybe over time to make these industry classifications more interoperable but also more ready for impact management, as it were. One of the key aspects of that is a more systematic and more coherent approach to how the value chain is considered, for instance. So we'll be, again, using that as a, as an input to our work also within our organizations for our resources that are built on industry classifications so that we can adapt those, but it's also something for us to engage statistical agencies and those who basically hold these classifications to move in this direction, hopefully. So that's in terms of some of the latest releases. They're all on our website. I'd like to turn back again also to the panelists, and maybe this time I can start with you again, Olivier. Again, just reflecting, I think, how some of these particular elements, whether it's nomenclature, whether it's industry classifications, the reflections that you have on how that impacts, potentially the work at Bloomberg. Obviously, Bloomberg is one of the entities that has an industry classification, but maybe you also see that as, an area for further work that the platform could do. So it'd be great to hear your views in that regard.
Thank you. To confuse you, Bloomberg, we do have many different kind of classification. So yes, we started with a kind of traditional market classification with 7 levels. But when we started to create our ESG scores, 4 years ago, we realized the need, the starting point of any analytics, sustainability analytics, is to have a tailor-made classification. So yes, we took into account the supply chain, where the company is operating in supply chain, the operation itself, the business model, and obviously the product and services. So it's a lot of work, so much that we end up with 106 different models. So the way we score different companies, we've got different 106 models. It's a lot to maintain. So the problem of this is that we started with a framework of classification which is not open source. And now, 4 years later, we realize that, hey, we may have taken a different course of action if we had an open source classification. That would have been helping us, and it would have been helping the community in return as well, because in terms of classification, standardization, it's better. It goes without saying. So for that part, Bloomberg, we're not going to take that much benefits. But last year, when we worked with you on something which was more pure impact with the SDG alignment, we were very happy to find that nomenclature that you had about the different sectors or subsectors aligned to the 17 SDG goals. We were even more happy to see that you had that kind of impact mapping for all those different categories. It was open source. It was there for us to use, and using this, we are sort of promoting your good work. So I think it's a win-win for this. No question about that. Now, it is really the classification. It may sound boring, but it's foundational, because anything then on top of this is going to be linked to this. On top of this, it will be the selection of all the indicators, the topics. The topics are linked to the classification. Again, to have something open source is priceless, because I can show my traditional ESG financial materiality scores, and I could, thanks to that research that I need to read about the different topics, because it's open source, I could easily say, for that model, for that company, maybe 60% of the topics I'm using, my priority was financial materiality, but maybe 60% of them are impact as well. So it's a kind of very smooth way to democratize what is impact to someone who is just living under the fiduciary duty aspect of things. But the last thing for me, where you could help us, help at least the non-believers to be converted, is to aggregate those numbers. You are specialists. All of you are specialists. You know all those different subtleties. Majority of our clients just want to have an answer to easy questions. So they come to us to say, give me a score. It looks like an ugly word, a score, but it does summarize some complexity. So there are two things that I think, in terms of where we can do better, is one is basically to tell us of all those different topics, which one are more important. Because if I look at the EU, they provide the CSRD with double materiality. They don't tell us which one is financial materiality, which one is impact. At least you answer that question. That's great. The next question will be, which one is more important than the other one? That will be a win. And the last one, and I think I go back to you, Mark, will be, okay, which one is going to be, what will be my monetary impact on my company, on my investment, being short mid or long term. That's, I think, the things that now that we have got the classification, now that we have got the topics, nomenclature, we would love to have the regulator to push for the disclosure, obviously, because without disclosure it's kind of difficult for us. But the next step is clearly to know which one is what, impact or financial materiality, and what is the weight of them. That was for me.
Thanks, Olivier. And yeah, we've got a lot of things to do in the next 3 or even more years. But Vincent said something earlier on about, you know, this research being an opportunity for, you know, the partners themselves to do introspection and to work with this material, and yeah, kind of, you know, draw the lessons, learn from that. And I wonder, Susan, Noelia, if there are any reflections on your end on, you know, how do you think this kind of research could be used in the future? You know, how would you use something like this, and how could it be an input to what you're doing next within, you know, your organizations, and yeah, helping us move in that direction that Vincent was saying around, you know, connectivity and complementarity between our resources?
Sure. I think with the Global Compact, you know, given that we're kind of a distribution channel for the platform, I think we're also a feedback collection mechanism. So I think when we would want to collect feedback from our participants and inform in future R&D and how various publications and initiatives from the IMP have landed. But I think internally, you know, we've thought about kind of taking a more sector-specific approach. How do we interact with participants who are in sensitive sectors? So I think that kind of sector and topic focus will inform our future programmatic development and maybe some strategic development over time. I think also we want to make sure that we can leverage the data that we're collecting for the platform. I think we would be able to maybe inform kind of R&D for SMEs specifically. Over 55% of our participants currently are SMEs versus companies. So I think there's a big opportunity with the SME space, and I hope we can make a big difference in terms of supporting them with their impact management efforts over time. So I think there's both the introspection for future programmatic development for the UNGC, but I think we also are really committed to helping move the next phase of IMP's work forward however we can.
Thanks, Susan.
It's interesting because everyone that is involved in standardization will know how important starting by agreeing on definitions is. There is no standards word that does not start by, okay, vocabulary, definitions. Every ISO work will start there. And we really understand the importance of that in driving impact investment, in driving impact decision, in actually driving international trade. Like we have developed standards around circular economy to introduce circularity practices in organizations, and we face now the situation where waste is actually something that you cannot trade because there are international conventions that don't allow you. And we are in those discussions now, like what is waste, what is actually residual materials that can be actually reused in circularity. So just to give a very clear example on how just a definition on what it will be waste, what will be residual materials, can impact the economy and international trade. So being part of this work for me has been very, very interesting to look at the complexity actually of around different nomenclatures, different sector classifications, how this actually reflects, right, the different priorities of the organizations involved, the organizations that develop those definitions. But in terms of reflection, for me what is important, I think, is that we have the common goal, I think, of the members of the platform of supporting market needs, of making sure that investors understand the actual economic value of impact. So I think it is very important that we come together, and within, of course, the scopes and the limitations of our organizations and the work we are trying to do, how can we bring clarity around around that. For me, I said it before, one of the aspects is already how do we link management system standards, impact management, to the whole effort that is being going on today to harmonize reporting so that we can give the right signals to the investors and drive money where it needs to go. So there already, if we agree on those nomenclatures, on those sectorial classifications, I think it will be a very important outcome for the market. And then the other aspect I think that it's been interesting for us as ISO is that usually our work has been very vertical from the sectorial perspective. But then, and that's something that comes out in the research, and you were mentioning the concept of value chain, this concept is actually changing. And today, those sectors start becoming interlinked, right? So that's going to have an impact, actually, on the sectorial classification, on definitions. So how, as standardizers, we can support that, and we can adapt to those changes. So this has been, again, one of the pieces that I think has been very interesting for us and make us think, okay, how can we adapt and develop standards for this situation we are living, right?
Thank you for sharing that, Noelia. I do want to make sure that we have a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers. So at this point, I'd really like to move on to what we were saying earlier on, which is that we've decided to move on for another 3 years as the platform. And so UNEP FI, we've absolutely cherished the first 3 years working hand in hand, co-chairing the initiative with OECD. And now we're very happy that we're going to get another period where we can work with the Capitals Coalition co-chairing this. And so, Mark, why don't you give a flavor of some of what we're thinking about for the next phase and some of our hopes of what might happen there?
Yes, so first of all, just to respond to Olivier, because I think I should do on that, and then I'll explain a little bit more about what we're doing next. So I think when we're starting to look at consistent information for investment decisions, you're completely right, you need a common denominator, dollars, that you can put that in. That we need those governance processes around that information to be able to do that. So it's completely possible now on every data point you have to give an impact number to it if we wanted to. The problem is the consistency that we can build into that. So one of the next things that we need to do is make sure that governance processes are there, that we know the box that we're playing in. So we've got the value factors, we could plug them into your Bloomberg terminals tomorrow, but actually the science behind it is solid. But is it going to be able to give you the information you need? Not until we've actually got all parts of the system connected, which is why the IMP is so important, because it's bringing GIN together with the investors, it's bringing the market mechanisms, it's bringing in the business codification and things. So we need all of those pieces to be able to give you what you need, but it is coming. I'm quite sure of that. I won't give you a date yet, because that would be a bit too much. I think the next thing for us here is that there's lots of organizations, as you know, involved in this space. What we are setting out in this next phase is a very common vision of the future. So what is it that we all want to achieve in 10 years' time? And the next piece of that we all want to do is take the best bit of what each of our organizations is doing and feed that into that future. So rather than what we've been doing up until now, that very important bit of understanding what we're doing in the different parts of the system and getting the nomenclature and all of those pieces together, now what we want to do is work out what it is we can contribute to the future. So if each of the organizations you've been hearing about today and the others that we have as part of the IMP can put their best piece of work into that future, then we start having something that everyone can contribute to. So it's not about comparing us, it's about we're all contributing to a future vision. And then we're all going to be activated towards delivering that. So this is why, Olivier, I'm confident we're going to be able to give you that data that you need, because we're all lining ourselves up to be able to contribute to the mainstreaming of this. And each one of us has a different part of that puzzle, as we were saying earlier on, but each one of us can be able to contribute the best of what we're doing into that.
Thanks, Mark. And Vincent, I'd like to give the last word to you before we hand it to the audience.
I'll just, I'll just say we have been co-chairing and co-hosting this platform with Careen's team at UNEP FI for 3 years now. Collaboration between international organizations is not a given. Good collaboration, I think, is even more rare, and so we just think, it's been a really fruitful and pleasant experience with UNEP FI, and we're equally happy to pass the baton on to Capitals Coalition. These things also can't go on for too long because then things do get institutionalized, and it's always good to bring in some fresh energy. And so Mark and his team at Capitals Coalition are going to step in as a rotating co-chair, but us at the OECD will continue to be involved, as will all of the other partners.
Thank you so much for a great collaboration, but we just continue, as you say, we're rotating. The point is we continue the collaboration, and that's what's so important. And we've managed to keep a little bit of space for questions and answers. It's very bright, but I did see one hand there and then one up there. So please, sir, in the front.
Thank you. Does this work? This is incredibly formal, this room, I have to say. I'm Douglas Beal. I'm with Boston Consulting Group. So Ronnie Cohen was on yesterday, right, and spoke, and I was seeing now that they're now part of your coalition, right, and they're looking to value the impact, right, and get that recognized. You're titled management, so there's measurement, there's management, there's valuation. What direction are you going, and how, I guess it's a little bit of the philosophy of, do you want to rely on the investors to do the measurement or to recognize what that measurement means for them as they evaluate whether they should invest in a company? Or, so this is a hard question to ask, do you provide that valuation, right? Or do you rely on the investors to value it themselves depending on what they believe to be financially material? I guess there's a bit of a philosophical question there, right? Ronnie Cohen would say we need to value it and get it out there in the public domain and create those valuations. Does that then take away from the competitiveness of an ESG integration team with an evaluation, within an asset manager to be able to do that themselves? I guess that's, sorry, complicated question, not very well articulated, but
good questions. But I'd just like, so that we can, there was another hand up, so to make sure that we hear the question.
Careen Wilson, GV Partners, former OECD. First, I wanted to congratulate you all for the incredible work the last 3 years. I know it's been a long, not always easy road, and the work that you've done has been really, really critical and set a really important foundation. I'm so excited about the next 3 years and all of the possibilities. And Mark, it was great to hear from, first of all, thank you for stepping up as the co-chair. I was excited to hear a little bit about the vision. It would be nice to hear a little bit more as well, also in terms of the group, because the group grew a little bit over the first 3 years, but how are you all thinking about the sort of configuration and really being able to deliver something that's going to mainstream in the coming years? Thank you.
Thanks, Careen, and I should take this opportunity actually to just signal to the audience that Careen was part of the inception of this platform 3 years ago. So it's great to have you with us as well today, Careen. Just checking if there's any other hand up. Okay, I think there's one last one, and then we'll go to answers because we'll run out of time. Oh, did I miss one? Okay, 2 questions, then we'll answer, and we'll have to wrap and give the room back. So please, I'm not sure which hand was first, maybe in the back and then in the front.
Hello. Oh, perfect. Hi. I just wanted to understand more about what the platform thinks about the concept of additionality, mainly because obviously you can value, measure, and manage impact, but what's the concept of what if you do nothing? Like, what's the counterfactual in the situation, and how the separate sectors and industries are thinking about this as part of the IMP?
Thank you. And the last question.
Thank you. My name is Dennis West. I'm a researcher at Oxford University, and I'm also chairing, organization called Greenings that is around for the last 15 years, but now really getting into cross-sector collaborations between research and practitioners. My question to you is really, how do you engage with researchers, with the scientific community? And followed up on that, how do you avoid science-based claims that are not really science?
Thank you. I'm sure we can deal with all of that in the next 4 minutes. I just want to answer maybe a couple of things, but would like to turn to everyone else from the group. But there was just a point at the very beginning saying, okay, measurement, management, valuation, like which bit is it? So that is something that we have tried to start clarifying. So management we really take as a term that has all the aspects basically relating to impact, all the way from identifying topics to measuring to then taking action to monitoring, and valuation indeed is a part of all that. So that is something that's actually outlined as the actions of impact management that can be found on the website. But perhaps, and I can come back to some of the questions around the community and growing the community that Careen, and also there was a question here on scientific, but there was a question on valuation more specifically, and I don't know, Mark, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so obviously Ronnie is part of the work in the International Foundation and the GCS and the other organizations. There's different tracks to this, so I think we have to, every tree isn't worth $10. You can't just put a number on it and plug it into a system. It's not going to work like that. So it's going to have to rely on the valuation expertise that is already in the system. That's going to have to be there. But you have to follow a structure to be able to do that. So what we're offering here is that consistent structure across the market that should be in the contracts that are done within business. So literally between landowners and those that are on the land, that should be consistent language that's going into the investments, that's going into the policy that's then driving the system. So we would expect the valuation to still sit within the investor's market, and we're not going to say every tree is worth $10. But what we do need to do is make sure there's a very clear structure for how that is done. Because if and this is a problem in the financial markets at the moment, every financial institution is coming up with their own approach on this. And if we do that, we're going to spend another 10 years with everyone claiming my method is bigger than your method. That's not going to help us at all. Compete over the delivery, don't compete over the method. We'll give you the method, you compete on the delivery of it.
Thanks. I don't know if anybody wanted to speak to science-based and the additionality question. Again, I don't want to hog the space on some of these questions. I think maybe some of you wanted to come in on.
I can take the additionality one. You know, the promise of the platform is not that we are all going to sit around the table and create one single resource. The problem of the promise of the platform is that we are going to work together as an ecosystem and create standards and frameworks that solve different parts of the process. And impact management involves managing both your negative impacts and also involves considering positive impacts. And right now there is specific audiences that are specifically interested in that, and there are resources that cater to those audiences. On additionality specifically, I recognize that, you know, maybe not all the answers collectively we have found yet on you know, additionality assessments, and there's surely more work to do, and so that's definitely something that we can take on as a platform.
Can I just add as well that there is an attribution framework which many of us in the IMP have been using for a time, equivalent to the scopes 1, 2, and 3. So there is a way of doing it. The problem we've got is actually in Germany, there is no word for counterfactual in German, someone's told me. So we need to work out a language issue with that because it doesn't actually exist. But there is actually an attribution framework that actually helps with some of that, how do we get additionality?
Thank you. I'm mindful of the other questions as well around, I guess, a little bit the community. Careen, you were asking about, you know, future growth potentially. I think you can expect to see a little bit more growth indeed over the next period. We can't make any announcements right now, but I think you can expect to see some of that happening. There was, I guess, a question on the science community in particular. So what you're seeing around the table is basically the community of, you know, the main initiatives, norm builders, mostly in the voluntary space, effectively. And I guess coming from a place of, okay, these are effectively the mechanisms that a lot of practitioners and market players are using as a basis. It's also something that policymakers and regulators look to inform their regulatory and policy building process. And so it's important that, we speak to each other and we drive coherence and we make it a puzzle where the pieces fit, as opposed to having two left arms instead of a left arm and a right arm. And so in that sense, it's been a little bit, kind of speaking amongst that community. But we very much, do want to, I think, over time, see how a broader community can take on some of these topics. We've done, some R&D. There's so much more that could be done. And so if this, if the academic and scientific community could chip in there, that will be immensely helpful. I think it's just that we're at the beginning of a process, but very, very open to doing more on that. So I don't know if there was another question that hasn't been answered. I think we might have done everything, but I don't know if my co-panelists have anything they want to add on any of the points that were raised as well.
Maybe just to complement, but from the ISO perspective, since you responded on behalf of the platform, we do engage with researchers, and actually we encourage researchers and academics to be part of the standards development. Like, the ISO process is about bringing all the stakeholders at the table, maybe the ones actually that not necessarily align initially with your views, but that's the value proposition that we propose, like bringing everyone and ensure that there is consensus and agreement, going back to the importance of agreeing on definitions. And in that sense, I have to say that in ISO, we do actually liaise a lot with researchers and academics in our work.
Thank you. Thank you, partners, co-panelists. It's been a pleasure. I hope this has been informative for those who are brave to stay until 6 p.m. There's a lot more material on our website, impactmanagementplatform.org. It's a bit long, but it's not that difficult. We'll also make that material available on the website. Thank you for sticking around with us, and we're still here if you want to talk to us. But for now, have a nice evening. Thank you.